I never meant to check my phone at 3:41 a.m. The screen was cold, the voicemail icon glowing like it had waited. I played the message on speaker and heard my voice whisper something I don't remember saying. Back then, I worked late most nights. Nothing strange about that. The office stayed quiet after 8, just me and the hum of old fluorescent tubes. I'd drive home around midnight, park under the same street lamp, climb 3 flights to my apartment. Same routine for months. That Tuesday night felt no different. I remember unlocking my door, dropping keys on the kitchen counter. The milk had expired 2 days ago. I threw it away, brushed my teeth, set my alarm for 7:30. Sleep came easy then, but I woke up feeling like I'd missed something. Not time exactly, more like presence. The way you feel when someone leaves a room just before you enter it. My phone sat on the nightstand, face down. That's how I always left it. But the notification light blinked red through the gap between phone and wood. One new voicemail, received at 2:17 a.m., while I'd been sleeping. I pressed play without thinking. My own voice filled the dark room, slow and careful. It described a hallway I'd never seen, wallpaper with tiny blue flowers, a door at the end with no handle. The voice, mine but not mine, spoke like it was giving directions to someone lost. Turn left at the water stain, it said. The carpet feels soft there, softer than it should. Don't look up at the ceiling fan. It doesn't spin the right way. The message lasted 43 seconds. When it ended, I sat in bed, staring at the phone. The timestamp showed clearly, 2:17 a.m. I'd been asleep since 12:30. I told myself it was a glitch. Phone companies made mistakes. Maybe some crossed wire, some technical error that recorded random audio and assigned it my number. But the voice knew things. It knew about carpet texture, about ceiling fans that spun wrong. It spoke with my inflection, my pauses, my way of drawing out certain vowels. I played it again, then once more. Each time, the words sounded more familiar, like lyrics to a song I'd forgotten I knew. The next morning, I mentioned it to my co-worker Jake during our coffee break. He laughed, said technology was getting weird these days. AI could fake anyone's voice now. Probably some spam call gone wrong, he said. Nothing to worry about. But I started noticing small shifts around my apartment. Keys weren't where I'd left them on the counter. They sat by the window instead, lined up in a way I never arranged them. The fridge light flickered differently, casting shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly. I checked my call log that evening. No outgoing calls at 2:17 a.m. No record of dialing my own number. According to the phone, I'd received the voicemail from an unknown caller. But the voice remained mine, unmistakably mine. The next night, I unplugged the phone before bed, pulled the battery out, wrapped it in a towel, tucked it in my dresser drawer. I slept better, knowing nothing could wake me with phantom messages. But morning brought the red light again. Same voicemail icon, same timestamp, 2:17 a.m. exactly. The message had changed, though. Now my voice described a different place. A parking garage with numbered spaces that went higher than they should. Level B12, level B15. My voice counted them like a prayer, like something memorized through repetition. I put the phone back together that afternoon, hands shaking slightly. The voicemail stayed in my inbox, waiting. I couldn't delete it. Each time I tried, the phone would freeze, then restart itself. The message always returned, preserved like something important. Work became harder to focus on. I'd catch myself listening for phantom rings, checking my pocket every few minutes. The fluorescent lights seemed louder, more insistent. My coffee tasted different, metallic and thin. Jake asked if I was feeling all right. I looked tired, he said. Maybe I should take a few days off, get some rest. But rest felt dangerous now. Sleep meant losing time, losing control. Sleep meant waking up to messages from a version of myself I couldn't account for. That Friday night, I decided to stay awake. I made strong coffee, settled into my kitchen chair with a clear view of the phone. I'd catch whatever was happening, prove to myself that technology was playing tricks. No mysterious voicemails could appear if I was watching. The hours crawled past. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m., then 1:30. My eyes burned, but I kept them open. The phone sat silent on the table, screen dark and still. At 2:15, I blinked. Just once, just for a second. When I opened my eyes, the notification light was blinking, red and patient, and somehow satisfied. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers. New voicemail, received at 2:17 a.m., exactly on schedule, as if something had been waiting for that precise moment to speak. This time, my voice sounded tired. It spoke about walking through rooms that connected in impossible ways, doors that led to the same hallway, but from different angles. It mentioned the smell of rain on concrete, even though the sky outside my window was clear. "You're getting closer," the voice said at the end. "I can feel you listening." Over the next week, items started appearing in my apartment. Small things at first, easy to dismiss. A coffee cup I didn't recognize on my counter, with a lipstick stain in a shade I'd never worn. A newspaper folded to the crossword puzzle, half completed in handwriting that looked almost like mine but slanted wrong. I found a scarf in my coat closet, soft and gray and smelling like unfamiliar perfume. Something floral but faded, like flowers left too long in water. When I held it up to the light, I could see small holes near the hem, carefully mended with thread that didn't quite match. The receipts started showing up in my jeans pockets. Gas stations I'd never visited, coffee shops in neighborhoods I'd never driven through, all paid with cash, all signed with my name in that same tilted handwriting. The dates were recent, sometimes from the night before, always during hours when I'd been home sleeping. My name appeared on the back of a train ticket to Millfield, a city 2 states away. I'd never heard of Millfield before, never had any reason to travel there. But someone had written my full name in careful letters, along with a phone number I didn't recognize. I called the number from work during lunch break. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. A woman's voice, tired and distant. "You've reached Sarah. I can't come to the phone right now, but if this is about the apartment, I'm still interested." I hung up without leaving a message, but that night, my phone's voicemail had changed again. My voice now mentioned Sarah by name, speaking to her like an old friend. It gave directions to a place called Riverside Park, describing a bench near the water where ducks gathered in the early morning. "Tell her I'll bring the photos," my voice said, the ones from before everything changed. I'd never met anyone named Sarah, never been to Riverside Park, never taken photos of anything worth sharing. But my voice spoke with such certainty, such familiarity, that I almost believed I'd forgotten some important part of my life. The items kept accumulating. A book of poetry with passages underlined in blue ink. A grocery list written on the back of an electric bill. Items I never bought. Lavender soap, chamomile tea, fresh basil. The handwriting matched the train ticket, matched the crossword puzzle. I started keeping track, writing down each new thing I found. The list grew longer every few days. A hair tie wrapped around my bathroom faucet. Quarters lined up on my windowsill in groups of 3. A post-it note stuck inside my refrigerator with a single word: remember. My dreams began to shift during this time. I'd walk through places that felt familiar but wrong, like childhood homes rebuilt with the wrong dimensions. Hallways stretched longer than they should. Doorknobs turned the opposite direction. In these dreams, I was always looking for something I'd lost, something important enough to search for, but too vague to name. The voicemails kept coming at 2:17 a.m. exactly, each one longer, more detailed. My voice described entire conversations with people I'd never met, restaurants where I'd apparently eaten meals I couldn't recall. It spoke about a job at a library, shelving books in sections that didn't match any numbering system I knew. The poetry section is on the 3rd floor, my voice explained one night. Next to the broken elevator, Mrs. Chen always leaves the cart by the philosophy books. Don't forget to check the return slot before you leave. I had never worked at any library, never met anyone named Mrs. Chen, but my voice carried the weight of routine, of daily experience lived and remembered. Jake noticed I was distracted at work. I'd stop mid-sentence during meetings, staring at nothing. Once, I caught myself checking my watch repeatedly, as if late for an appointment I couldn't remember making. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz in rhythm with my heartbeat. I tried staying away from my apartment for a few nights, sleeping on Jake's couch, but the voicemails followed me. They appeared on my phone regardless of where I was, always at the same time, always in my voice. And the items kept showing up in my apartment even when I wasn't there to bring them. One morning, I found a photograph tucked under my coffee maker. It showed a woman sitting on a park bench, feeding ducks from a paper bag. She had dark hair and kind eyes, and she was looking directly at the camera with a small, sad smile. On the back, someone had written, "Sarah, Riverside Park, October," in that familiar, slanted handwriting. I stared at the photo for a long time. The woman looked like someone I should know, someone important, but her face was completely unfamiliar, like a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong person's album. That night's voicemail was different. My voice sounded urgent, almost afraid. It spoke about meeting Sarah at the park, about showing her the photos, about something that needed to be explained before it was too late. "She's been waiting," my voice said, "longer than she should have to. The ducks are still there, and the bench, and the way the water catches the light. But time works differently now. She might not recognize you at first." The message ended with breathing, slow and careful, like someone trying not to cry. A woman called me during lunch, sounding cautious but determined. I was eating a sandwich at my desk when the phone rang, and something about the way it sounded made me answer immediately, instead of letting it go to voicemail. "Is this really you?" she asked without introduction. Her voice was soft but strained, like she'd been crying recently. "The one who left the message last night?" I told her she had the wrong number, that I hadn't called anyone, but she knew my full name, both first and last, and she pronounced it exactly right. Most people got the emphasis wrong on my last name, but she said it like she'd known it for years. You told me to meet you at the old Marini, she continued, near the boat launch where the fishing pier used to be. You said you had something important to show me. I'd never been to any marina in the city, didn't even know there was one. But she described my voice so precisely, down to the way I supposedly paused before saying important words. She knew about the slight rasp I got when I was tired, the way I tended to talk faster when nervous. You sounded scared, she said, like something was chasing you. But you said it was safe at the marina, that the water would keep it away. I asked her name, though I thought I already knew. She hesitated, then whispered, Sarah. The same Sarah from the photograph, from the voicemails, from the train ticket to Millfield. She was real, and somehow some version of me had been calling her. When I checked my call log after hanging up, her number wasn't there. No outgoing calls for the past 3 days. No record of contacting anyone named Sarah. But that night's voicemail mentioned water and waiting, spoke about meeting someone by a pier that stretched into dark water, like a finger pointing at nothing. The marina closes at sunset, my voice explained. But the gate by the parking lot doesn't lock properly. You can slip through if you're careful. Follow the concrete path until you hear the water lapping against the posts. She'll be waiting by the third piling from the end. I drove to the marina the next evening, following GPS directions to an address I'd never searched for. The place looked abandoned, chain link fence surrounding empty boat slips, and a small building with boarded windows. But the gate was loose, just like my voice had said. It swung open with barely any pressure. The concrete path led through tall grass and scattered debris toward the water. I could hear gentle splashing ahead, rhythmic and soothing. The fishing pier had been removed years ago, leaving only the support pilings standing like broken teeth in the shallow water. Sarah sat on a piece of driftwood near the third piling, wearing the same clothes from the photograph. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and her expression shifted from hope to confusion to something like fear. You're not him, she said quietly. You look like him, but you're not him. I asked what she meant, but she just shook her head. She'd been coming to the marina every few nights for weeks, she said, waiting for someone who called her regularly but never showed up. The voice was always mine, always promising to meet her, always explaining things that never quite made sense. He tells me about places we've been together, Sarah said. Restaurants, movies, walks in parks I've never visited. He remembers conversations we've never had. But he sounds so certain, so sad, like he's lost something precious and can't figure out how to get it back. She showed me her phone, scrolling through missed calls from my number. Dozens of them, all at odd hours, all lasting just long enough for detailed voicemails. I recognized the timestamps. They matched exactly with the times when mysterious messages appeared on my own phone. Last night he said you were coming, she continued. The real you, not the one who calls. He said you needed to see this place, needed to understand what was happening before it got worse. The water lapped against the pilings in a steady rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out once, then fell silent. The marina felt suspended between worlds, neither fully abandoned nor properly maintained, like a place that existed in the spaces between decisions. Sarah reached into her jacket and pulled out more photographs. All of them showed the same woman from my coffee maker picture, but in different places, different seasons. Sometimes she was alone, sometimes with a man whose face was always turned away or obscured by shadow. The photos looked old, faded around the edges. "He gave me these," she said. "Mailed them to my apartment with no return address. Every one of them is supposed to be me, but I don't remember posing for any of them. Don't remember being in most of these places." I studied the pictures in the dim light. The woman looked exactly like Sarah, down to the small scar on her left hand and the way she tilted her head when smiling. But Sarah was right. Something felt wrong about them, like they'd been taken in a world that ran parallel to this one, but followed slightly different rules. "The voice that calls me knows things," Sarah said, "about my childhood, my family, things I've never told anyone, but he gets details wrong. Says my sister lives in Portland when she's actually in Phoenix. Claims we met at a coffee shop that doesn't exist on a street that has the wrong name." She stood up, brushing sand off her jeans. The movement was graceful but tired, like she'd performed it many times before in this exact spot. "I think something is trying to reach us," she said. "Something that remembers a different version of our lives, but it's getting the details mixed up, confused about which world it's supposed to be in." My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah's number sent just seconds ago. But Sarah was standing right in front of me, her phone tucked away in her pocket. The message read, "Don't trust what you see. She's not supposed to be here yet." I found the mirror behind my hallway cabinet while trying to move it the next morning. The whole thing had been bothering me since the marina, sitting crooked against the wall like someone had bumped into it and never bothered to straighten it back up. When I pulled the cabinet away from the wall, expecting to find scuff marks on the paint, I discovered a large mirror instead. It was built into the wall itself, framed with dark wood that looked much older than anything else in my apartment. The glass was clean, but somehow dim, like it had been installed facing the wrong direction. The wall behind the cabinet looked normal during daylight hours, just mirror and wood frame, reflecting my hallway back at me in perfect detail. But I started checking it every few hours, drawn by a feeling I couldn't name. Something about the reflection seemed patient, like it was waiting for the right moment to show me something different. After 2 a.m., things changed. The mirror began to show a faint outline behind my reflected hallway, like a double exposure on an old photograph. At first I thought it was just tired eyes, the way shadows can trick you when you're not sleeping enough. But the outline grew clearer each night, more defined. It was a doorway, cut directly into the wall behind the mirror, sealed with plaster but still visible as a thin rectangular line. The proportions were wrong for my apartment, too tall and narrow, like it had been designed for people who move differently than we do. That same night, my voicemail whispered, "You're almost through. The wall is thinner than it looks. Press where the handle used to be." I stood in front of the mirror at 3 a.m., studying the outlined door. My reflection stared back, but something was off about the way it moved. When I raised my right hand, my reflection raised its left. When I stepped closer to the glass, my reflection stayed exactly where it was. The next morning, I called my landlord to ask about renovations. Had anyone ever sealed up a doorway in my apartment? He sounded confused, said the building was only 15 years old and had never been remodeled. All the apartments were identical, he insisted. No extra doors, no structural changes. But I could see the outline clearly now, even during the day. It ran from floor to ceiling, behind the mirror, perfectly straight and deliberate. Someone had carefully plastered over an opening, then hung the mirror to hide the work. I pressed my palm against the glass where the handle should have been. The mirror was cold, much colder than room temperature, and for just a moment, I felt something move behind it. Not physically, but like a shift in air pressure, like someone opening a window in the next room. My reflection pressed its palm back against mine from the other side of the glass, but we weren't moving in sync anymore. Its face showed an expression I wasn't making, eyes wide with something between fear and excitement. The voicemails grew more urgent after that. My voice spoke about crossing over, about finding the right door before someone else found it first. It described rooms beyond the wall, places where time moved in different directions, and Sarah was still waiting by water that never stopped moving. The mirror only shows the truth at night, my voice explained, when the barrier gets thin enough to see through. Don't look too long, or you might forget which side you're supposed to be on. I started having dreams about walking through that doorway. In the dreams, I'd press through the glass like it was made of water, step into a hallway that looked like mine, but stretched impossibly far in both directions. The walls were covered with mirrors, each one showing a different version of my apartment, different arrangements of furniture, different lives being lived in the same space. Jake asked if I was getting any sleep. I looked pale, he said, and I'd been making mistakes at work. Simple things, like forgetting to save documents or calling clients by the wrong names. During one meeting, I'd stopped talking mid-sentence and stared at the conference room window for almost a minute, like I was seeing something the rest of us couldn't. But I couldn't stop checking the mirror. Every night I'd stand in the hallway, watching my reflection behave like a separate person. It would touch the outline door from its side while I stood still. Sometimes it would mouth words I wasn't saying, urgent and silent and impossible to read. The night Sarah called me for the second time, my reflection was already waiting by the mirror when I got home from work. It gestured for me to come closer, pressed both hands against the glass from the inside. When I mirrored the movement, the glass felt warm instead of cold. "He's been trying to reach you," Sarah said over the phone. Her voice sounded distant, like she was calling from very far away. "The one who looks like you. He says the door is almost ready, but you have to choose soon, before someone else decides for you." I asked her where she was calling from, but the line filled with static before she could answer. When the static cleared, a different voice was speaking. My voice, but slower, more careful. "Don't let her distract you," it said. "The mirror is showing you the way home. Sarah will be there when you cross over. The real Sarah, not the one from this side." The call ended with the sound of water lapping against something hollow and metallic. I stood in my hallway, staring at my reflection in the sealed door's mirror. For the first time, my reflection smiled back at me with an expression of patient satisfaction. I began recording my sleep to prove nothing was happening. Set up my phone on the nightstand, angled toward the bed, recording through the night. If something was using my voice to leave messages, I'd catch it in the act. The first few nights showed exactly what I expected. Hours of footage of me sleeping peacefully, turning over occasionally, breathing steady and quiet. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained the voicemails that kept appearing on my phone. But on the fourth night, I heard myself speak. Not awake, not sitting up, but flat on my back with eyes closed, lips moving just enough to form words. The audio was clear enough to understand most of it. I spoke in a language I didn't recognize. The words flowed smoothly, like I was fluent, like I'd been speaking it my whole life. The rhythm was hypnotic, almost musical, with pauses that felt like punctuation in an alphabet I'd never learned. When I played the recording back the next morning, I found myself understanding pieces of it, not the individual words, but the meaning behind them. I was describing a journey through rooms that connected at impossible angles, giving directions to someone who couldn't find their way home. I started dreaming in that voice after that. Not in English, but in the musical language from the recordings. In the dreams, I walked through staircases with no railings, rooms where gravity pulled sideways, hallways that loop back on themselves without warning, always searching for something, always feeling like I was close but not quite there yet. The voicemails on my phone changed again. Now they included both languages, English and the musical one, sometimes switching mid-sentence. My voice would start explaining something in familiar words, then drift into the strange language, like it was more natural, more precise. The door behind the mirror leads to where she's really waiting, my voice said one night. Then it switched languages, speaking in flowing syllables that somehow meant. But time moves differently there. She's been alone so long, she might not remember your face. I researched the strange language online, playing clips for language identification websites. None of them recognized it. I posted short samples on linguistics forums, asking for help. The responses were confusing. Some people said it sounded like a dialect they'd heard in dreams. Others claimed it was similar to languages their grandparents had spoken, but couldn't place which ones. Jake suggested I see a doctor. Maybe I had some kind of sleep disorder, he said. People sometimes did weird things while asleep, spoke in tongues, acted out dreams. But this felt different. The language was too consistent, too structured to be random sleep talking. The recordings showed other strange things as I continued filming. Sometimes I'd sit up in bed and have full conversations with someone who wasn't there. Not in the musical language, but in English, talking to someone named David about places I'd never been. The train to Millfield runs every 3 hours, I'd say to the empty air. But you have to get off at Riverside Station if you want to find the marina. Don't trust the conductor when he says the next stop is downtown. I had never met anyone named David, never planned any trip to Millfield. But my sleeping self spoke with the confidence of someone giving directions they'd given many times before. The voicemail started asking questions before ending with silence that stretched too long. My voice would pose puzzles about time and memory, then wait as if expecting an answer that never came. If you could wake up in yesterday, my voice asked one night, would you change the things you don't remember doing? Would you save someone who's been waiting longer than they should have to? The silence after questions like these felt expectant, like something was genuinely waiting for my response. But I never knew what to say to a voice that sounded like mine, but seemed to know things I'd never learned. Sarah called me again during one of these silences. I was lying in bed, listening to the latest voicemail, when my phone rang with her number. But when I answered, no one spoke, just breathing, slow and careful, like someone trying to stay calm. I can hear you listening, she finally whispered. Both of you, the one who's awake and the one who calls me. Which one is real? Before I could answer, the line went dead. But I could still hear breathing, coming from my phone speaker even though the call had ended. Breathing that matched the rhythm of my own, perfectly synchronized. That night's sleep recording was different. Instead of speaking in the musical language, I hummed a melody I'd never heard before. Simple and sad, like a lullaby someone might sing to help a lost child fall asleep. When I played it back the next morning, I found myself humming, along without thinking about it. The melody stayed with me all day at work. I caught myself humming it during meetings, in elevators, while typing emails. Jake asked what song it was, said it sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. When I tried to explain where I'd heard it, the words felt slippery, hard to arrange in the right order. The voicemail that night included the same melody, but sung by multiple voices, all of them mine, but from different times, different recordings. They harmonized perfectly, creating a sound that was beautiful and deeply unsettling. Time to choose, the voices sang together. Time to cross over, time to find out which side of the mirror is home. I returned from work early that Thursday and noticed the sheets had shifted. Not dramatically, but the way they only do after sleep, with that specific rumpled pattern that comes from a body turning over several times during rest. I always made my bed before leaving for work. Hospital corners, pillows arranged just so, everything smooth and neat. But now the blankets were pulled back on the left side, my side, and the pillow still held a faint impression of someone's head. My apartment smelled like someone had just showered. Steam still clung to the bathroom mirror, and my towel hung differently on the rack. Damp, but not soaking, like it had been used an hour or two ago. The soap bar sat in a small puddle of water that hadn't been there that morning. I checked every room, every closet, every space large enough to hide a person. Nothing. The front door was still locked from the inside, deadbolt engaged exactly as I'd left it. The windows were closed and latched. But someone had been here. Someone who knew how to use my shower, how to sleep in my bed. The voicemail that night was different. Instead of the usual timestamp, it showed no time at all. Just my voice, sounding relieved and exhausted. "You forgot to lock the door this time," it said. I was able to come home for a few hours. The shower felt good. I'd forgotten how warm the water gets, how soft your bed is. Thank you for leaving everything exactly where it should be. But I had locked the door. I remember doing it twice. Once with the regular lock, then again with the deadbolt. I always double-checked, because the apartment complex had seen break-ins the year before. I started leaving small tests for myself after that. A hair stretched across the door frame, a piece of tape on the bathroom cabinet, a coin balanced on the edge of my nightstand. Things that would move if someone else was in my apartment while I was gone. The tests were always disturbed when I came home. Not broken or torn, but carefully moved and replaced, like someone was trying to be respectful. The hair would be reattached to the door frame, but slightly lower. The tape would be pressed back onto the cabinet, but not quite straight. The coin would be returned to the nightstand, but heads instead of tails. My shoes started facing the wrong direction when I stepped out of them. I always left them pointing toward the door, ready for the next morning. But when I'd check before bed, they'd be turned around, pointing back into the apartment, like someone had been wearing them in the opposite direction. Jake mentioned that I seemed more relaxed lately, better rested, less distracted. He was right. I'd been sleeping deeply, dreamlessly, waking up refreshed for the first time in weeks. But the apartment felt different each morning, like it had been lived in while I was unconscious. I found unfamiliar items in my laundry hamper. A t-shirt I didn't recognize, soft and faded, with a logo from a band I'd never heard of. Socks that were the right size but wrong color, white instead of my usual black. When I held them up to the light, they looked worn in patterns that matched my feet perfectly. The voicemails began to include daily updates, like reports from someone living parallel to my life. My voice would describe meals I hadn't eaten, conversations I hadn't had, errands I hadn't run. Stopped by the hardware store today, my voice reported one night. They had the screws we needed for the cabinet. Also picked up batteries for the smoke detector. It's been beeping for weeks, but I finally got around to fixing it. My smoke detector wasn't beeping. Never had been. But when I checked it the next morning, the battery compartment was open, and fresh batteries sat on the kitchen counter, still in their packaging. Sarah called me while I was examining the batteries. She sounded tired, but oddly peaceful. "He's been visiting me too," she said. "The one who looks like you. He comes to the marina in the afternoons, sits by the water, tells me stories about places we've been together. But he can't stay long. Says he's borrowing time from someone else." I asked her what she meant, but the line started crackling with interference. Through the static, I could hear my own voice speaking to her in the background, too distant to make out words. "He says you're sharing the same space now," Sarah continued, "taking turns being real, but soon he'll have to choose which one gets to stay." The call ended with a sound like water draining from a bathtub. I stood in my kitchen, holding dead batteries that someone else had bought, wondering if I was slowly disappearing from my own life. That evening, I came home to find a note on my refrigerator, written in my handwriting but not my words. "Thank you for letting me borrow your bed. I'll try to be more careful with the sheets tomorrow. The shower pressure is perfect, by the way. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be clean." The note was signed with my name, but the signature looked tired, grateful, and somehow afraid of using up something precious. I found the library card under my couch while searching for a pen I had dropped. It was wedged between the cushion and the wooden frame, bent but not damaged, issued in my full name with a signature that looked like mine, but wasn't quite right. The issue date was 3 months ago, but I'd never applied for a library card in the city, never even visited the main library branch downtown. The plastic was worn around the edges like it had been used regularly, carried in someone's wallet or pocket until the corners grew soft. The address on the card led me to a building 3 streets away from my apartment. I'd walked past it dozens of times without really looking, assuming it was just another old office building waiting for renovation. But the faded sign above the entrance read, Millfield Public Library, Branch 7. I'd never heard of any place called Millfield in the city. According to my phone's maps, no such location existed within 50 miles. But the building stood exactly where the address indicated, solid and real and somehow familiar. The front doors were chained shut, with a notice posted about structural damage and indefinite closure. But the chains were loose, more for show than security. I slipped between them and pushed through the heavy glass doors into a lobby that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. Inside, every book had its spine torn off. Thousands of volumes sat on crooked shelves, their backs raw and exposed, showing only white pages and binding glue. The floor was covered with torn book spines, scattered like fallen leaves in colors that had once been bright. I walked deeper into the building, past reading tables covered with dust and study carrels with broken chairs. The deeper sections felt wrong, like the architect had designed them without understanding how libraries were supposed to work. Aisles dead-ended into walls, shelves reached different heights for no reason. Ceiling lights hung at odd angles that created pools of shadow between the books. The card catalog sat in the center of the main floor, a massive wooden cabinet with hundreds of small drawers. I pulled one open at random and found index cards, all handwritten, all containing only my name in different handwritings. The same name, over and over, but written by different people with different pens at different times. Every drawer was the same. My name repeated thousands of times, written in scripts that ranged from careful printing to hurried cursive to shaky, elderly hands. Some cards were yellowed with age, others looked fresh and new. All of them bore only my name. No book titles, no subject headings, no catalog numbers. A payphone stood near the entrance, its receiver dangling from a cord that had been stretched almost to the breaking point. As I examined the card catalog, the phone rang once, sharp and insistent, like it had been waiting for someone to be close enough to hear it. I let it ring. The sound echoed through the empty library, bouncing off bare walls and naked book spines. When it stopped, the silence felt expectant, like the building itself was holding its breath. The voicemail that night included static and breathing, punctuated by the distant sound of papers being shuffled. My voice spoke between these sounds, reading from cards that seemed to describe different versions of my life. Subject worked at Branch 7 from March to September, my voice read. Specialized in poetry, reshelving, and philosophy maintenance. Noted for staying after hours to repair damaged spines. Last seen organizing the basement archives that were never supposed to exist. I had never worked at any library, never repaired book spines, never organized archives, but my voice continued reading, describing job responsibilities and performance reviews for work I'd never done. Employees showed unusual familiarity with the non-standard numbering system. My voice continued. could locate books that weren't listed in the catalog, remember titles that had been removed from circulation. Supervisor notes indicate possible prior experience at similar facilities. The breathing between readings grew more labored, like someone struggling to stay awake while performing important work. Sometimes the static would increase, drowning out words, but the rhythm of reading continued underneath. Sarah's number appeared on my phone the next evening, but when I answered, she didn't speak immediately. I could hear paper rustling in the background, the sound of footsteps on the hard floors. "I'm at the library," she finally said, "the one that's supposed to be closed. There's a whole section downstairs about you, books with your picture, newspaper clippings with your name, job applications signed in your handwriting." I asked her how she'd gotten inside, but she didn't seem to hear the question. "The basement goes deeper than it should," she continued. "There are reading rooms down here with tables set for 2 people. Books left open like someone was just here, just stepped away for a moment. And the books all have their spines intact down here, not torn off like upstairs." The line crackled with interference, but I could hear her turning pages, moving through space. "One of the books is about us," she said. "About meeting at the marina, about the voicemails, about doors behind mirrors. But it's written like it already happened, like someone was documenting the whole thing from the beginning." The call ended with the sound of a book closing, final and definitive. I sat in my apartment, staring at the library card that shouldn't exist, wondering if someone had been writing my life before I'd lived it. When I tried calling Sarah back, her number was disconnected. The automated message said the number had never been in service. At a cafe downtown, someone waved at me like she knew me. I was waiting in line for coffee, checking my phone for messages, when movement in my peripheral vision made me look up. She sat at a corner table near the window, one hand raised in greeting, face bright with recognition. She looked exactly like me, down to the small scar on my left eyebrow and the way I tended to bite my lower lip when thinking, but older, more tired, like I might look after years of not sleeping well. I turned away quickly, pretending I hadn't seen her, ordered my coffee with hands that shook slightly, kept my eyes on the counter while the barista worked. But I could feel her watching me, patient and persistent, like she had all the time in the world to wait. When I glanced back, she was gone. The corner table sat empty, no cup or plate or sign that anyone had been sitting there. But the chair was still warm when I passed it on my way out, and the air smelled like perfume I didn't recognize but somehow found familiar. That night, my voicemail included her voice alongside mine. 2 identical voices speaking in harmony, then separately, then interrupting each other with increasing urgency. "You need to stop looking," she said, her version of my voice strained and worried. "Every time you see me, it gets easier for the walls to break down." "I'm not supposed to exist yet," my voice replied. "But the mirror door is almost ready, and time doesn't work the same way on both sides." The 2 voices began speaking over each other, creating a conversation that was impossible to follow, but somehow deeply important. They talked about borrowed time, about spaces between worlds, about someone named Sarah who was waiting in multiple places at once. I started seeing her more frequently after that, always in crowded places where I could pretend not to notice. She'd be browsing magazines at the drugstore when I went to pick up prescriptions, standing in line behind me at the bank, wearing clothes I owned but had never seen her in before, walking past my office building during lunch breaks, always just out of clear view. She never approached me directly, never tried to speak or get my attention beyond that first wave at the cafe, but her presence felt deliberate, like she was checking on me, making sure I was still where I was supposed to be. Jake asked if I had a twin sister. He'd seen someone who looked exactly like me at the grocery store, he said. She'd been studying the soup aisle with intense concentration, like she was trying to remember something important. When he'd called out my name, she'd looked up with an expression of panic and hurried away. I told him it must have been a coincidence, just someone who happened to resemble me. But I knew it wasn't true. The woman Jake had seen was the same one from the cafe, the same one who kept appearing in my peripheral vision like a reflection that had learned to move independently. My dreams began to include her during this time. We'd meet in impossible places, rooms that existed between the floors of buildings, staircases that led to the same landing, no matter which direction you climbed. In these dreams, we could speak to each other directly. "You're the one who's supposed to cross over," she'd tell me. "I'm just keeping your place warm until you're ready. But we can't both exist in the same space much longer." She knew things about my life that even I had forgotten. Reminded me of a teacher's name from 3rd grade, the exact words my grandmother had said before she died, the feeling of riding a bicycle for the first time. But she also knew things that hadn't happened yet, or had happened differently in another version of events. "Sarah is real," she explained during one dream conversation. "But she's split across multiple timelines now. The marina Sarah, the library Sarah, the phone Sarah. You have to choose which one you want to save." The voicemails grew more complex as the encounters with my other self increased. Sometimes 3 or 4 versions of my voice would speak at once, debating choices I hadn't made yet, arguing about consequences I couldn't understand. "If we keep borrowing time from each other," one voice warned, "eventually there won't be enough left for either of us." "The mirror door only works once," another voice added. "After that, whoever crosses over is stuck on the other side. No more switching places, no more sharing the same life." Sarah called me while I was listening to one of these complex voicemails. But when I answered, it was my other self speaking, using Sarah's number, but not her voice. "You saw me at the cafe," she said. "I wasn't supposed to let you see me so clearly. The boundaries are breaking down faster than we thought." I asked who she was, what she wanted, why she looked like me but knew things I didn't. The questions tumbled out before I could stop them. "I'm what you become if you don't cross over," she said. "The version of you that stays on this side while the real you goes to find Sarah. But I'm getting tired of waiting, and the body can't support both of us much longer." The call ended with the sound of glass breaking, distant but final. That night, I avoided looking in any mirrors, afraid of what I might see looking back. But in my dreams, she was waiting by the mirror door, hand pressed against the glass from the other side, mouth moving in words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. It's time to choose. One night, I followed GPS directions from a calendar entry I don't remember making. The appointment was listed for 11 p.m. at an address I'd never seen before, labeled simply, meeting. Don't forget the photos. I found the photos on my kitchen table when I got home from work. The same ones Sarah had shown me at the marina, plus several others I'd never seen. All of them featured the woman who looked like Sarah, but in settings that seemed slightly wrong, like someone had tried to recreate familiar places from memory, but gotten the details confused. The GPS led me through neighborhoods I'd never explored, past warehouses and industrial buildings that looked abandoned but showed signs of recent use. The address belonged to a single-story building with no identifying signs, just a number painted on glass doors that reflected my headlights back at me. Inside, I found a single-lit room furnished with an old recliner and a radio playing my voicemails on repeat. The chair faced a wall of monitors, all dark except one that showed a live feed of my empty apartment. My living room, my kitchen, my bedroom, all captured from angles that shouldn't have been possible given the layout. I sat in the recliner without thinking about it. The leather was warm, molded to a body shape that fit mine perfectly. As soon as I settled into it, the other monitors flickered to life, showing different versions of my apartment with subtle variations. Different furniture arrangements, different wall colors, different lives being lived in spaces that were almost but not quite the same as mine. One monitor showed Sarah sitting at my kitchen table, writing in a notebook I'd never owned. Another displayed my other self, the one who looked like me but older, searching through my closet for clothes that weren't there. A third screen revealed the library basement, where figures moved between shelves that stretched higher than the ceiling should have allowed. The radio cycled through voicemails I'd never heard before, messages that described this exact moment. My voice explained how to operate the monitors, which buttons controlled which feeds, how to navigate between different versions of reality. Channel 7 shows what happens if you never got the first voicemail, my voice instructed. Channel 12 reveals the timeline where Sarah never went to the marina. Channel 15 is what your life looks like from the other side of the mirror. I reached for the remote control that sat on the chair's armrest, but as my fingers touched the plastic, the lights dimmed and the air grew thick, like the room was breathing around me. When I blinked, the door I'd entered through was gone. Solid wall where the entrance had been. No handle, no frame, no way out. The monitors continued showing their various feeds while I searched for an exit. I ran my hands along every wall, looking for hidden panels or switches. Nothing. The room had sealed itself around me, become a perfect box with no openings. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt fluid in the chair, like the recliner existed outside normal duration. I watched myself sleep in different apartments, wake up to different voicemails, make different choices that led to different versions of the same basic story. On one monitor, I saw myself refusing to check the first voicemail, deleting it without listening. That version of me lived a normal life, never met Sarah, never found the mirror door. But he looked hollow, like something essential was missing. Another screen showed me crossing through the mirror immediately, stepping into a world where Sarah was waiting, but everything else was wrong. The walls in that apartment were the wrong color. The windows faced the wrong direction, and Sarah's face held an expression of disappointment that never faded. The radio began playing a new message, one recorded in real time as I sat watching the monitors. My voice described what I was seeing, what I was learning, what choices lay ahead. Every decision creates a new channel, my voice explained. Every timeline needs someone to observe it, to keep it stable. The room only appears when you're ready to choose which story you want to live. I must have fallen asleep in the chair because I woke up in my own bed with dirt under my fingernails and the taste of dust in my mouth. The sun was rising outside my window, and my phone showed a new voicemail that chilled me more than any of the others. That wasn't the first time you've been in that room, my voice said, tired and strained. You keep going back, keep watching the monitors, keep hoping you'll see a timeline where everyone gets what they want. But the chair's changing you each time, making you more like the person who watches than the person who lives. I checked my fingernails in the bathroom mirror. The dirt was real, gritty and dark, like soil, from a place that never saw the sunlight. And in the mirror's reflection, I could see the faint outline of the sealed door, more visible now, like it was getting ready to open whether I was prepared or not. The voicemail continued playing from my phone in the bedroom, my voice growing more urgent. Next time you find the room, don't sit in the chair, don't watch the monitors. Choose a door and walk through it, even if you can't see where it leads. The final voicemail came without a timestamp. Just my voice, slower than usual, strained and scared in a way that made my chest tight with recognition. If you hear this, I didn't make it back, the voice began. The words carried weight, like someone speaking their last will through a phone they weren't sure would work. But I left you everything you need to understand. The mirror door, the library cards, the photos of Sarah. Just don't pick up the phone when it rings after midnight. That's when they start calling back. My voice continued, describing things I'd never experienced, but somehow remembered. Walking through the mirror door into hallways that stretched beyond reason. Finding rooms where multiple versions of Sarah waited, each one slightly different, each one convinced she was the real one. Time doesn't work the same way on that side, my voice explained. You can spend years there and come back to find only minutes have passed. Or you can visit for an hour and return to discover decades have gone by. The chair in the monitoring room helps you navigate between timelines, but it changes you every time you use it. The message paused, filled with breathing that sounded labored, like someone trying to stay conscious long enough to finish something important. I found the real Sarah, my voice continued. Not the one at the marina, not the one from the library, the original, from before the timeline split. She's been waiting in a place between worlds, keeping track of all the different versions of herself, trying to figure out which reality she belongs in. My phone began to ring while the voicemail was still playing. Sarah's number, but I didn't answer. The ringing stopped, then started again immediately, then again, each time more insistent, more desperate. Don't trust the ones who call after midnight, my voice warned through the speaker. They're not really us anymore. They're echoes, recordings, impressions left behind when someone crosses over without properly closing the door behind them. The voicemail described a choice I'd apparently made in another timeline. Cross over permanently to find the real Sarah, but leave behind an echo that would gradually forget it wasn't real. Stay in this world and let Sarah remain trapped between realities, never able to find her way home to any of them. I chose to cross over, my voice said, which means you're probably the echo I left behind. But echoes can become real if they want it enough, if they're willing to make their own choices instead of just following the pattern. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since the voicemail began. Sarah's number, over and over, but each ring sounded different. Sometimes electronic, sometimes like an old rotary phone, sometimes like wind chimes in a storm. The mirror door is ready, my voice continued. It's been ready since you first found it. But crossing over means accepting that you might not be the real you, that the person you think you are might just be an impression left behind by someone who made this choice before. I walked to the hallway mirror while the voicemail played. My reflection was gone. Just the sealed door behind the glass, outlined clearly now, with a handle that looked like tarnished brass. If you're listening to this, then I'm probably still alive on the other side, my voice said, still trying to help Sarah find her way home, still trying to understand which version of reality is supposed to be real. But I can't do it alone anymore. The ringing stopped suddenly, replaced by silence so complete it felt like the absence of sound rather than just quiet. In that silence, I could hear something moving behind the mirror, footsteps in a hallway that didn't exist in my apartment. The choice is yours now, my voice concluded. Cross over and help us find the way home, or stay here and let the echoes fade until there's nothing left but empty rooms and phones that ring for people who stopped existing. The voicemail ended with a sound like a door closing, final, definitive, but somehow hopeful. I stood in front of the mirror, hand raised toward the glass. My reflection was still missing, but I could see through to the other side now. Sarah was there, the real one, standing in a hallway that looked like mine, but felt different, more solid, more permanent. She was holding a phone, looking directly at me through the mirror, with an expression of patient hope. Behind her, I could see myself. Not my reflection, but the version of me who had crossed over first. He looked tired, but relieved, like someone who had finally found their way home after being lost for a very long time. The phone began ringing again. Not Sarah's number this time, but my own. I was calling myself from the other side of the mirror, from a place where choices had been made and accepted. I pressed my hand against the glass. It felt warm, yielding, like water that had learned to hold its shape. The surface gave way as I pushed through, and for a moment I existed in both worlds at once. Then I stepped completely through into the hallway where Sarah was waiting. The phone stopped ringing. Behind me, the mirror showed my empty apartment. Everything exactly as I'd left it, except for the absence of the person who used to live there. Sarah smiled and took my hand. Her touch was real, solid, familiar, in a way that the other versions had never been. "Welcome home," she said. "I was beginning to think you'd never remember how to find this place." The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with doors that led to rooms I was only beginning to remember. But for the first time since the voicemails began, I wasn't afraid of what I might find behind them. Together, we walked deeper into the space between worlds, leaving behind the echo of a life that had served its purpose. And somewhere behind us, in an apartment that was slowly forgetting it had ever been occupied, a phone rang once more, and then fell silent forever.